What's up, guys? Hey, this is Christian Brindle with Six Figure Medicare Agent. Hope this video finds you doing well. And I have a really, really special guest here today. Anybody that's been in the business for any extended amount of time has probably heard his name before. I have Dante Cantu here with me today. Dante, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on. Most people in the business are going to know me as Richard Cantu. Dante's my middle name and what I go by with friends and family. But glad to be on and enjoying meeting you.
Absolutely. I mean, the feeling's mutual. I mean, I've heard so many things about you, and I think you have just a unbelievable story and journey. And why don't you take us back to the beginning? Talk about how you got into the insurance business. Like, when around did you start building your company, and how did you get into the business?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So just kind of give you some background, because obviously you have listeners that are going to be starting at different parts in their lives. You know, some probably right out of high school, through their 20s, through their 30s, maybe some even at older ages, 40s, 50s. I'm getting ready to be 50. Quick background on me. I come from a small town in South Texas, home of the King Ranch, a place called Kingsville, Texas. Born, raised, educated there, went to school there, college, graduated with a marketing degree. Wanted to make more money than an entry-level marketing person could, so I got into sales. I was horrible at it. Didn't know how to sell anything, but didn't give up. About 2 or 3 years into my sales career, I started doing really, really well. Top performer, did technology sales for quite a few years, and then realized that I'd worked for 2 Fortune 500 companies and 2 startup companies over the course of about 8 years in technology. And just every company was either, Dell was having layoffs, Quest Communications overstated earnings and had to restate earnings for a couple of years and had some layoffs. I didn't get caught up in that. Went to go work for a startup company that promised a certain compensation, didn't happen, just really didn't have the products that they said they were going to have. Went to go work for another startup company and finally got laid off. I was 34 years old, and I was looking at kind of my career to date. I'm not a job hopper. I'm the type of guy that likes to dig in, learn, get really good at what I do, and excel. And I started realizing I'm not going to be able to do that doing what I'm doing, working for other companies, especially in the technology space. There seemed to be little value on keeping salespeople, a lot of bad business decisions. I felt pretty comfortable with my ability to make decisions. I felt really comfortable with my sales abilities. I decided that I wanted to start my own business. Ran it by my wife. She gave me the okay. And then it was a matter of, okay, what business do I get into? I had noticed that through the early 2000s in the technology space that the economy ups and downs really impacted whether or not a company was going to be able to keep people on or lay people off. And I realized I didn't want to be in a business that had those ups and downs. I did consider real estate, but real estate kind of goes up and down with the market. Right. And I went back and researched, what businesses survived the Great Depression, and insurance was one of those businesses. So that's what I decided to do. Get an insurance. That first year, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, property and casualty, but I had a buddy that connected me with a guy out of San Antonio who has a growing brokerage, a guy named Joe Chetwood. He has a company called Ahia Brokerage, and they focus predominantly on Medicare Advantage plans and sell Medicare supplements as well. And he kind of mentored me through it. First gig was him saying, hey, Humana's rolling out Medicare Advantage and Part D for the first time, and they need help in the Austin area. Can you build a team? So I built a team, and we sat in Walmarts and Sam's Clubs for about a year and a half as we rolled out Medicare Part D and Medicare Advantage for the first time back in 2005, essentially, and into 2006. And we did okay, but I started dabbling into the under 65 market. Again, this was 2006, and decided, that's what I want to focus on. And that was my predominant business, under 65 health insurance, but I did group health insurance, life insurance, a little long-term care. And the more I realized, how to build a marketing engine, I looked at things like I was buying leads initially. I mean, I think every new agent goes through this. You buy leads, you're not sure about the lead source. They can, a lot of times the lead sources, depending on who they are and what they're trying to accomplish, they may be good for a little bit and then they dry up. I did a lot of shared leads initially. And then I realized if I don't control my lead source, if I don't build my own lead source, I don't really control my business. Because I'll have to be switching lead sources all the time, and I'll have to figure out, where my next potential client's going to come from. And so figured out SEO. I mean, I'm the type that I need to focus on things. So I would actually close my shop, didn't take any new leads for a month to learn SEO. And I built a website. I applied all the principles at the time. And started generating leads after a couple to few months. Then I realized I need to be able to manage that a little bit better because I can't always predict how many leads I'm going to get through searches. So I decided to learn AdWords. So I learned AdWords and got really good with that. Back in that day, there weren't a lot of people online.
Right.
On the Medicare supplements side. But I was still doing under 65 health insurance and it was a little bit competitive. I had good cost of acquisition, but there were it was really tough underwriting back there in the under 65 space. I started looking at the competition. My cost of acquisition started to creep up. I created a page on my Texas Health and Life. That was the name of my business at the time. TexasHealthAndLife.com website. And I realized I started getting Medicare supplement leads. And this was probably 2007.
Wow. So really early.
Yeah. And I knew the market. I knew that it was going to be growing, 10,000 people, 11,000 people turning 65 every day. And so I knew the opportunity in the market. And I started to realize there's not a lot of competition. So I shifted over what I learned in AdWords to get away from the under 65 market to do a test on just the over 65 market, specifically for Medicare supplements. And I had better COAs. I had less competition. I had there were only a handful of companies around at the time, so could figure out underwriting pretty quickly and easily. Obviously, underwriting for Medicare supplements was a whole lot easier at that time than the under 65 market pre-Obamacare. And I generated about 12 to 15 leads a day. And I realized I'm writing a couple of policies a day. And over the course of the first 2 weeks, I think I wrote somewhere around 25 to 30 policies. Wow. Medicare supplement only, no cross-selling. And then I just decided I need to shift. There's too much opportunity in the Medicare supplement space. So I started Go Medigap in 2008, hired my first 2 people, and I sold Texas Health and Life. And my first sales guy, some people might know Russell Noga. He was my first sales guy. Hadn't been in the Medicare space. And I taught him my sales process. It was really just my under 65 sales process translated to the Medicare supplement space. And then, of course, you had to do the medical underwriting. And so I showed him how to do that. And he actually heard me on the phone because I was on the phone at times. And he picked up the sales process perfectly. He started crushing it. He and I were both writing on average 60 to 70 policies, Medicare supplement only. We weren't cross-selling a month. I had my first admin. My first admin was actually, her name's Kathy Vela. She's still in the business, but she was meticulous with paperwork and ensuring that policies got issued and following up on declined policies, and just outstanding. But we had this tiny little office that just fit 3 people 2 offices, and there was like a front reception area. She sat in the front reception area, and me and Russell would always have our doors open, so she'd hear us on sales calls, and we're going through the same process every time. Obviously, every situation is a little unique, but the sales process was the same. She picked it up. We got to AEP. Russell and I were writing 100 plus policies a month during AEP in 2008 and 2009, and she was licensed in Texas. We were just doing Texas leads at the time, and she got the script down. So people would call in while Russell and I were on the phone, and she'd take messages, and Russell and I would have to follow up. And then eventually we got so busy, I said, hey, listen, if you get somebody on the phone and you have an opportunity, just walk through the sales process with them. We'll work something out on pay. Well, she started closing better than Russell and I. She's from Southeast Texas and has a really cool Southeast kind of accent, kind of Louisiana, real smart. And she was also meticulous about process. And what I remember, she thinks it was more, and maybe it was, but what I remember is by the time she got into her second AEP, and most people won't believe this, but it's true, she was writing 145 to 160 Medicare supplement policies a month on her own. No cross-selling. So we're just crushing it. But here's the thing. Back then, less competition online. We were crushing it with SEO. We were crushing it with AdWords. We had good COAs. And as you kind of learn your processes and you grow your business and you start to bring people on, it's manageable up to a certain extent. If you're focused, there's so many people you can bring on where everybody's nailing process. You've got plenty of the really good leads for everybody, and because everybody's nailing process, you got good COAs. And then you start to hit some breakpoints as you grow the business. Maybe someone can handle 3 agents plus marketing plus administration plus all the other stuff you have to manage as an agency owner. Mm-hmm. And then you just kind of keep growing, hit the gas. You doubt yourself the whole time. You run into obstacles. You run into issues. But you just got to keep going. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the early growth. And it was a lot of fun. Those early years were a lot of fun. Yeah, there were some middle years that were a little tougher. And then my mission was never to sell the business. I really didn't want to do that. I wanted to build essentially a brand and a reputation over time that would allow us to grow the business, at least partially, if not mostly, organically, which gets hard as you grow further and further. But we had a stellar reputation. Medigap had a stellar reputation. We took great care of our clients. We had, a great culture. We won all sorts of awards for customer service. And that's something I'm very, very proud of. eHealth, saw that. They were looking to acquire an outbound Medicare supplement agency. I know they spoke with a few others, good friends of mine. They gave me a call, and we ended up working something out and sold the business to them in 2018 and worked with them for 2 years, left in January, and then since then just been taking care of personal stuff.
Hey, well, that's an amazing story. I mean, I think what people don't understand is the type of business you need to have to get eHealth's attention has to be a substantial one. They're not just buying out like little mom and pop agencies,
There's so many things to obviously discuss, and we probably can't cover everything in an hour. But I think the things that attracted eHealth to us was eHealth, specifically the CEO, and I think others there. Really, what they wanted to have a Medicare supplement proficiency. They were very, very heavy on the Medicare Advantage side, and they were also very heavy, almost predominantly almost 100% inbound sales. So they wanted to have the outbound proficiency. They wanted to have the Medicare supplement proficiency, and we had a very nice book of business, and we had a really nice reputation. We had really solid processes. Our sales were very effective. Sales processes and team were very effective. Our administration was very effective. We also built software. And I think this is something that kind of helped us stand out a little bit. And the software wasn't built to like, hey, if we build a software, someone will come buy us. We built our own underwriting software. So it was multi-carrier underwriting software that allowed our agents to ask. I mean, if you look at the Medicare supplement applications on the underwriting side, they're almost identical from company to company. So we kind of broke those down, and the agents would do the initial medical screening using those sets of questions, and based on the client's responses. And it also had a drug tool. It would, in our quoting system was a grid pattern of all our carriers, and we only really offered certain plans, A, C, F, G, and N. And what it would show is if they, maybe with certain carriers, they wouldn't qualify for whatever reason, it would gray those out and not be an offer to the client. And then if they weren't knocked out, then it would show, and the agent could then say, looks like you qualify for this company, and then finish the conversation and close. So they like the fact that we had the good sales processes, good administrative processes, and the software to support scaling quickly and maintaining those processes. And that's all, like, that's not overnight stuff. I mean, that's years of, realizing, certain issues and, the difficulty of just getting familiar with underwriting and the hurdle that creates, and the timeline for someone to get proficient. And if you're not proficient with something as simple or complex as underwriting, it's hard to sell confidently. And that comes across over the phone. If somebody's fumbling around trying to figure out if somebody's going to qualify or not, they come across as unconfident and really maybe incapable of making the right decision for the client. So those were all important things for us to do over time that we did. And we could have taken it a lot further. I really wanted to, but they were really nice, impressive systems that allowed our agents to sell right away.
Right. I mean, I think that's amazing though. And I think imagine the time it was saved over the years in terms of having that, system that you guys developed, and not having to, pull up a producer handbook or something like that for like 15 different carriers or something and going through them. And I think that's substantial. And I think, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but it seems to me like one of the most important things that goes into being able to scale your agency is being able to find how to do things quicker and more efficiently. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to an extent, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I know we talked a little bit about this before we started actually on the record, but I'm fascinated to see because it seems like you guys really started in like 05, 06, 07, 08, in focusing on the Medicare, which was but it seems like you were still doing a lot of the things that people are doing today to grow a business, like with the Google AdWords and the SEO and building that brand, if you will. If you had to start from scratch today in building an agency, is there anything you'd do differently with what's available in 2020 opposed to 12 years ago or so?
I mean, social media wasn't around when we started. And so, the opportunity to use those channels for leads weren't available to us. So, I mean, that's the only thing I can see that would be different. When it really came down to it, the sales process is identical. Medicare supplements haven't really changed that much since then. Certainly been some changes, but nothing significant. Underwriting is more difficult. There's a lot more carriers than there used to be. But outside of social media, probably not a whole lot would have done differently. It's pretty much all the same.
Right.
At least in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely seems that way, to me. I mean, so what would you say? Like, I had a question for you that I thought would be interesting for the audience. For someone like me, I'm at the point where I'm trying to, I'm basically trying to get to that next level in our agency. We've done really well. We've done really successful. What are a couple tips that you could give me that could kind of help me take my business to the next level? Because I'm sure there's a lot of agents that will watch this that are kind of going to be where I'm at, that are kind of, doing very well, but they want to do even higher levels than that. Any specific tips you think that most agents don't think about?
Yeah, well, let me share this first. I mean, I've seen some really good operators that had opportunities to really grow their business and be successful. And there's some gotchas that I warn people about. I know that, and not everybody's going to agree with me on this, but this is just speaking from experience. There's a lot of talk about 10xing and maximizing your growth and that kind of thing. I can't tell you how many good operators I saw that were like, man, throw all our money at it. Let's grow as fast as we can. And they didn't fully understand their longer term numbers. I used to call it, you warn people, don't outkick your financial coverage. Don't throw so much money into it right now with growth and hiring people to where you have no access to credit lines or cash in the future. And you find yourself having to let people go because something changed. Maybe your persistency wasn't as good as it was. Maybe your close rate drops. Maybe the market becomes more competitive and the leads are more expensive and your cost of acquisition goes up. And your compensation plan, that's a whole other subject. As you bring people on, I've seen time and time again, and I was guilty of it too. If you are an idealist, and the best ones are, you want to pay your people really well. You want to pay them more than they've ever made. And you feel like there's enough money to go around. And so you build these really rich compensation plans. And then there's a snag. Your cost of acquisition goes up. Your lead costs go up. Your close ratios go down. Maybe the quality of the leads went down. And you find yourself in a position where you have dwindling cash flow. You have dwindling reserves. And the only thing that you have the opportunity to do at this point is lay people off or reduce their compensation plans. One of the things that I did that I think allowed me to fully understand how much I really could apply towards growing the business. And it was painful in the first probably 4 or 5 years. Not painful for me in terms of my income, but painful in terms of, it was painful for me. I made less than $100,000 in the first 5 years. I didn't pay myself more than that because everything went back in the business. There was too much of a return to take more comp than that.
Right.
And so I built a spreadsheet that looked at all my fixed costs, all my variable costs, that looked at that factored in close ratios, issue rates, persistency, and I built it out for 2 years. And I would every month I'd revisit it, and if the persistency changed, if the close rates changed, if lead costs changed, cost of acquisition went up, I'm adjusting constantly. And what would end up happening is that by the end of the year, I could go pull the first spreadsheet that I pulled up that I started at the beginning of the year, and I would typically be within 5% of my goal or my projections at the end of the 12th month. And that's how well I understood my numbers. And so I think it's critical that people understand their numbers. They understand the long-term impact. Because what I see people do when they first start is like, oh, I make, let's just call it $300 in commission per year. I'm going to keep this client for five years. I'm going to make $1,500 on this client. I've seen worse. I've seen people say, well, I get commission paid for 6 years. Some say 7 years. And they start building these models that show that there's going to be this massive cash flow. But they don't consider all those gotchas of lead costs, lead availability, close rate, that impacts all your financials. So really important that you understand financials. Second thing I would say is that first year, you're going to have a lot of doubts. You're going to be figuring things out. Unless you have, what I love about today is, there have been guys like, especially with social media, Chris Westfall, Justin Brock, you, I see Allie, doing some great stuff. Just all of these folks that are out there putting out content that are helping agents get better traction. When I was doing it, there was none of that. There was no guru. There was no person that was out there trying to train everybody and offering free or paid content to learn how to sell Medicare supplements. I had a lot of doubts in that first year. I had a lot of doubts in that third year, that fifth year. And I could have probably quit at any of those times. So keep a focus on the mission. Keep a focus on what you're trying to accomplish. Realize that everybody goes through those tough times. The ones that end up doing well over time are the ones that can kind of brush that off. When I was having bad times, I always had to find something to try to improve the business. So things may have been tough, but I'm finding a way to improve the business some way. And then I'm seeing progress. And even if I'm not seeing it in my pocketbook, I'm seeing it in our systems, our processes, our ability to write business, our sustainability as a company, our culture. And then the other thing I always valued was, and I told myself this through the first 5 years, is like, hey, if this business ever goes away, if I fell for whatever reason, this is the best education I could ever get. Better than any MBA. And if I walk away with nothing other than I learned a whole bunch of stuff, man, that's invaluable for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just some of the points that I would say newer folks should concentrate on. And as you're building your business, make sure that you can manage your growth rate and not run out of money.
I think that's incredibly insightful, and there's a lot of wisdom in that. And to piggyback kind of what you said, everything you're learning you can take it with you somewhere else if maybe for some reason it doesn't work out for you. Like I did a podcast with Robert Bache, Medicare Bob, earlier in the year, and I'm sure I'm sure you guys know each other.
Absolutely.
And he told me that he said something that really stuck out to me. He was like, everything that I'm learning how to do right now, or everything I already know how to do right now in terms of advertising on Google, social media, and everything like that, he's like, if you can learn that stuff and master that stuff, you can sell anything. You can be successful doing anything. And I was like, that is so true,
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, the Medicare, I was specifically Medicare supplements. There's a lot of folks doing Medicare Advantage, a lot of people cross-sell. And I'll say this. I've only been in the business 15 years. Go Medigap only really existed, before selling, really 10 years. But I've had the pleasure of being on various panels since 2006, after my first year, for different carriers. And I've had the pleasure of working with folks like Bache and a whole bunch of other people, and learning their stories and how they market. And the reality is there's no one way to market that's going to cause you to be successful. I mean, one of the best stories I have is there was a lady that she was on the panel, and she was only writing like 25, 30 policies a month in the under 65 space. I was writing, 45 to 50 a month. And I started talking to her, and she said, yeah, I've been in the business for 5 years. I buy one lead a day. And I call them until I get a hold of them. And if they've already bought something, I ask them if they're okay with me checking in with them from time to time, because rates are going to change. And then I put them in a she called it a tickler file. And over the course of 5 years, she had built a huge tickler file, and she was constantly following up with them. They got to know her. They weren't always ready, but every 3 or 4 years, somebody was ready to take a look at something else and switch. And she built her whole business on that, buying a lead a day.
Wow.
And so you kind of translate that to like, your all of the opportunities to be successful in this business, and the patience and the persistency and just, how do you prefer to run your business? And specifically, in the Medicare supplement business, I mean, those folks that are in Medicare supplement business, we're blessed, man. Well, I'm not in it anymore, but we get to take care of people. And we feel good about taking care of people. We make great money doing it. If you're really good at it, you win trips. The people in the Medicare supplement business are just incredible people, very giving in a lot of different ways. I've had so much fun with, you name it, that's doing well in the business. Beige, Brock, Ash, Galen, Taylor, Vandenbergs. The Kunkles, all good people. So I've just so much enjoyed the Medicare supplement business. I may or may not get back into it at some point if depending on how things go next year. I've got another year of non-compete. We'll see what happens. But I've loved that business, and it's a blessing, and there's a lot of opportunity, and it just takes a lot of patience and persistence.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you there. Question I had for you, Dante. Did you guys, a two-part question actually, did you guys with Go Medigap, did you offer Medicare Advantage at all? And my second part of the question is, do you think, because there's been plenty of agencies over the years that have basically leaned heavily on med sups and only med sups, do you think that can be done today? Do you think it's harder to do that today than ever?
I mean, it's certainly harder today than it was when I started, but of course it can be done. You look at someone like Brock. Now Brock is outstanding, freaking standing. But his ability to build brand and reputation and generate low cost leads. Chris Westfall, same way. All the stuff he did with YouTube and the calls he gets. I mean, those are highly engaged, highly closable leads. If you figure that stuff out, you're going to get a lead source or a lead source or flow that's going to give you low cost of acquisition. And then it's just really time. Continue to build that brand, continue to build your lead flow, organic as possible. The better you are at organic, the more you can pay on the paid side. And then, I was a big spreadsheet guy. I would build it out. And, I'd like to maintain cost of acquisition under 400. I know some people get in the 700, 800 range, but you can really just build that business well over time. So I absolutely think people can do just Medicare supplements nowadays.
Gotcha. The reason I ask is because we see so many companies rising up now that are the flip side of it. They'll only sell Medicare Advantage, or that's their focus, or they'll sell both, but they'll sell a majority of Medicare Advantage. We sell a lot of Medicare Advantage, and so I've always wondered kind of what people's perception of that is. But I definitely know it's possible. I mean, it's clear because there's people out there that are doing it at a high level. That are focusing on Medigap.
Yeah, I think Medicare Advantage is easier. Tends to be a lower cost of acquisition. In many cases, it's $0 premium, and so and you can find people online, TV ads, mailers, and you can close a lot of business. And there's so much advertising for Medicare Advantage plans. I think a lot of people feel they have to. I didn't feel that I had to, especially at the point, prior to even being approached by eHealth. We had really strong cash flow. It was more about, do we have the systems in place? Do we have the leadership in place to be able to grow this thing as fast as we want to, considering the cash flow that we have? And we could have, and I think we could have increased in size, significantly had we not been bought by eHealth. And that was the plan. But there's so much that goes into it, man. I mean, it's do you have the right sales process? Do you have the right leadership? Do you have the right culture? Do you have the right people in the seats that are following the process as well as Kathy and Russell did when they first came on board? Because what happened in our environment and what happens in a lot of other environments when you start trying to grow too quickly is you're not as careful of making decisions as to who you bring on. You'll put them through a training. everybody ramps differently. So it takes 6 to 9 months for you to really figure out on the average person whether or not they're going to be really good at this or not, even with the right systems in place. But I think people can. Now, the reason we did it is because I wouldn't sell my parents a Medicare Advantage plan. So to me, it was it was a personal thing. I was responsible for rolling out the first Medicare Advantage plans. The various carriers that I worked with were, using words like all-in-one plans and other things that made it seem like it was going to work like a Medicare supplement, and they were going to love the experience and not have to pay for it, and it's going to save them money. And then I ran into issues that we all, if you've sold Medicare Advantage or you've worked against Medicare Advantage, like, hey, I've got cancer, I want to go to MD Anderson, and they just told me I can't because I have this Medicare Advantage plan. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't specifically call out maybe MD Anderson, but you are restricted to a network. And now someone that has potentially a life-threatening illness can't go to the medical facility they want to. So I never wanted to be responsible for putting someone in that situation. I found too many people in that situation. Now, that's just me personally. When you look at it more from an absolute business perspective, Medicare Advantage plans make sense. And some people, I think, maybe, especially in these times as they're getting more competitive, you feel like you have to play that game. And the reality is, there are plenty of people out there that either don't want, for whatever reason, they've convinced themselves that they're healthy and they're never going to get sick and they're not worried about what doctor they see, or they can't afford it for whatever reason, or they don't qualify medically for Medicare supplement. That Medicare Advantage is a good fit. We really would just feel more comfortable passing that opportunity on to a partner that sold Medicare Advantage at the time. It's different now that e-health is acquired, but back then that's how we felt.
Right. And it makes sense. I mean, I'll have clients ask me all the time. They're like, well, what would you get if you were turning 65? And I always say I'd pick a Medicare supplement. If I was having to make a choice myself, I'd rather be on a Medicare supplement than anything. But my parents are on Medicare Advantage plans because my dad has been an agent for 30 plus years, and that's what he wanted, so he put himself on it, and so it's always interesting because the clients always say, what would you put your mother on? What would you put your father on? What would you put yourself on? And those answers are different because my dad's an agent. He made his own decision,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and here's what happens though, man. Like, sometimes we don't really, and this is just everyone. I'm not just speaking about your dad.
Sure.
We don't think about maybe he did, about, like, I'm sure your dad's very successful. I'm sure he's done really well for himself. And I'm sure he's probably, fairly healthy. And he probably didn't mind seeing the doctor that, was in the network, or maybe his doctor takes it. But if your dad is as successful as I believe that he probably is, if he's as financially comfortable as he probably is, if he's so comfortable financially that he can self-insure and he doesn't really care that much, that's one thing.
Right.
If he does just really well for himself, and God forbid, knock on wood, something serious were to happen to him, and he were wanting to go see the absolute best specialist in whatever that condition was, and he realized that his Medicare Advantage plan would not allow him to see that person.
Yeah.
He will probably be kicking himself for putting himself in a position where he can't have the choice of doctors that he wants at a critical time when he needs it. He needs to go see that particular. He doesn't need to, but he feels he should have the right to.
But he would want to. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's just, you can tell I'm passionate about it. I've just run into too many people that have found themselves in that position, and some of them I could help. Maybe they did qualify for a particular company, but a lot of them I couldn't. They were kind of stuck, and so I'm very passionate about it, as you can sense. I just can't see my dad in a Medicare Advantage plan, and really it's paid off. I mean, my dad had a stroke a couple of years ago. He went to the best stroke facility in Texas. When he went to rehab, he had the choice of just about any rehab facility he wanted to go to. The person that was next door to him, I was speaking with that person's kids, and that person had a Medicare Advantage plan, and they were looking at their choice of rehab facilities, and they were still good, but they weren't the 5-star facilities. They were, 4 stars, 3.75 star facilities, and they were confused and frustrated that they didn't have access to the 5-star facilities.
Right.
So those are the things that I worry about with Medicare Advantage.
Yeah, I get it. I understand completely. I mean, it's tricky. I mean, I would definitely, if I was turned 65, I'd go Medicare supplement every way. I mean, every day of the week.
Yeah.
We've all seen those kind of situations, and it's horrible. You hate seeing that. Last question I had for you, Dante. If there's an agent out there that's listening that's just brand new to the business, let's say they just got their license, they just got through, certifications if they're selling Medicare Advantage or whatever the case might be, they just got contracted with some med sup carriers. What would be one piece of advice you could give to them that could maybe make a difference in whether they make it in the business or not?
One piece.
I know that's a loaded question.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I think a lot of it is mentality. So this is what I would tell my new agents. Are you familiar with the 4 levels of confidence?
No, I don't think I am. I don't think so.
Okay. And you can look this up, and maybe when I talk about it, you're familiar with it. So we all start out with, when we're doing something new, unconscious incompetence. Have you heard that before?
Yes. Yeah, that does ring a bell.
Okay. We don't know what we don't know. And when that happens, we like to think highly of ourselves. So we think, I'm going to crush it. I'm going to do so well at this. I'm going to blow it out. There's this guy, Christian Brindle. I'm going to kick his butt. And you go into it with a lot of bravado. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. You tend to do that.
Right.
Then you go from unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know, and you think you're going to do great, to conscious incompetence. You realize, oh my gosh, this is so much more difficult than I thought. What am I going to do? Did I make a mistake? How am I going to figure this out? I'm going to run out of money. And that's when your anxiety and stress level go way up. That's usually 3 to 6 months into it that you start freaking out. It takes a year to a year and a half for most people or more to get to a level of conscious confidence where your mind is at ease. You know that you know what you're doing. You know your numbers. You know how to access leads consistently, decent quality. You know what your close rate's going to be. You have an idea of what your persistency is going to be. You know medical underwriting. You know when you get on the phone that your sales process is more effective than most others that they're going to possibly deal with. And you start to feel pretty good about it. But maybe you slip up here and there and then you fix it. And that's about, again, year and a half mark where people get there. Now you've got to be able to get to that point mentally and financially. And then about that year and a half point, conscious confidence. And then it's probably 2.5 years where you're unconsciously competent. Like you don't even have to think about it. Like the script that you wrote a year and a half ago that you've been using this whole time, you could say it at any point, and probably 20 years after you're out of the business, you could probably recite that script, that sales process. And so that's when you're just crushing business and doing really well, and then probably thinking about bringing on help. But it's that second part, that conscious incompetence where you start to realize how much you don't know. That is the biggest challenge for people. And then also financially, make sure that you can support your family or yourself in whatever way. Now, let me hit on that real quick. I had a pretty good idea. I hadn't fully built out my spreadsheet early on. I looked at it. I had a 6-month-old son when I got laid off and got into insurance. I just bought a brand new house. It was at the top of the range of my affordability on my income at that time. I had a 401k. I looked at what I needed to do. I looked at cost of leads. I had an understanding of my cost, my potential close rate. I knew it was going to be low initially. I was very realistic, and I probably even set my expectations a little bit lower than what I felt I really could do, because I wanted to be conservative and make sure I could make it. I went through my 401k, which wasn't really a whole lot. Went through all my retirement. I told my wife, we are going to be broke. We're going to be so broke, we can't buy anything. We can't go out to eat. No entertainment, no trips, unless I win one. And we're going to be broker than we have ever been. She understood that. We were broke for about a year and a half, to the point where going into that second year, and I took her to one of the Chinese grill places where they make the food in front of you. And with first time being there, they had the menu on the outside wall. Each plate was over $20. Figured we'd have a couple of drinks, tallied out that this is probably going to cost me $70-$80. I looked at the cost of leads. I looked at my close ratio in my head, and I said, this is the deal. This is worth, at the time, $350-$400. This is going to be a $350 to $400 meal if I use this money for this versus leads to close more business. And I had to look at her and ask her if she wouldn't mind if we went somewhere else. And you have to know that life, it doesn't matter if you were a six-figure before, six-figure salesperson before. Life in that second year, and really kind of the end of that first year, that second year gets really, really tough financially for most. And that's normal. And you've got to embrace that suck and know that you're going to get through it. And the best way to do it is just know what's coming and have your financial projections, and just be willing to live through it.
Yeah. I mean, I love how your mind works, because, you just calculate in your mind, okay, if I spent this much on leads, it can turn into this much and this, and, I think that's a great way to look at it. And I think that's very true. Like, I remember when I started, my wife and I, who was my girlfriend at the time, we were living in some crappy apartment. She was working full time and sometimes overtime, to help pay bills. And we were living off of a couple credit cards and eating like ramen noodles at dinner and stuff like that. Like, it took some time for us to get built up and everything. First year or two, like you said, it can be tough. It can certainly be tough.
Yeah. I mean, just set the expectation for yourself and your loved ones that, hey, there is a reward at the end. It might be 5 years out. It might be 10 years out. It might be 2 years out. But there's a whole lot of pain in the first year to year and a half that we're going to have to live through to get to the other side to where we're comfortable. The other thing I would say is, a lot of times people have big expectations and big goals, and then eventually they get to a point where maybe they're making 100, 150,000, and they're happy. So it becomes a lifestyle business, and now they're working 6 hours a day, 4 days a week. They take Fridays off, have 3-day weekends, and they just stop. And that's okay if you can maintain it. I've always been of the thought, if you're not growing, you're probably retracting, because you're going to lose some clients unexpectedly, and so I always try to push for at least a little bit of growth.
I agree. I mean, I think if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards, and things happen all the time that you're not expecting. So I think there's a lot of truth in that. Well, Dante, thank you so much for taking the time. This was an incredible conversation and a great piece of content that I think will help a lot of agents. So, I mean, I know you don't do a whole lot of these, so thank you so much for taking the time, and I'm flattered by it, and I really enjoyed getting to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I've seen your name out there. I've seen a lot of the newer guys that I haven't had an opportunity to meet. So really good to talk to you, and hope to talk to you again in the future. And if you ever have any other questions, feel free to reach out.
Hey, well, thank you. I mean, I will. You might regret telling me that, because I'll bother you sometimes. But yeah.
Hey, listen. Right now, I'm kind of in a retirement mode.
Okay. Yeah. Got time, right?
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much. And everybody, if you have time, go back and watch this through again, because there were some real bombs and gems that were dropped, that Dante dropped. So thanks again for taking the time. We'll have to do it again soon. And thanks everybody for watching the video. If you like the video, make sure to drop a like on the video, subscribe for future content, and we'll be back with you with another video shortly. Thank you.
Take care, Christian.